Hi, I'm Craig the Geologist, and welcome to part 2 of my special on rhyolites. In part 1, we talked in detail about how rhyolites form and why they look the way they do. We also hiked and flew around the Keweenaw Peninsula of Michigan, exploring where you can find rhyolites on the beaches and in formation. We also explored Horseshoe Harbor a bit and walked across the Copper Harbor conglomerate, talking about where these rhyolites originally came from in terms of the mid-continent rift and the eruptions that happened back then, and also about how those rhyolites are actually recycled. It's not their first time coming to the surface. We even learned why setting up your camera on a tripod on a windy day is a bad idea.
No.
In this episode, we're going to focus more on the rock hounding. We're going to get out there, we're going to be picking up these rhyolites and having a look at them, discovering the textures you can find in them and the interesting patterns, and deciphering what we can learn from these rocks when we pick them up on the shores and find them for ourselves. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come join me. As I continue enjoying lunch with my family at Hunter's Point, apparently working on this delicious pasty for over a week now. Let's fast forward a few minutes in time and have a look at the amazing rhyolites just underneath my feet. So let's talk about rhyolites a little bit and just have a look at what's beneath my feet here on this beach. Initial observations, they're all very red. This one's kind of more of a brownish maroon, but you get some very red guys out here. You get a lot of pinks. See if that'll focus. Yeah. Now this isn't 100% rhyolite out here. You do see some basalts and other volcanic rocks from this region over here. Rhyolites are volcanic rocks. They are extruded lavas, and they come out of a volcano extremely thick. They have a very high viscosity. They're oozed out rather like toothpaste. They either come out extremely explosively, if they have a lot of gas, or if they're mostly degassed, they ooze out in these giant mounds that flow very slowly. Because of their thickness, as they flow, they often shear, and you get what's called flow banding in these. And you can see stripes in here from where this very thick, gooey magma was flowing and sliding past itself, shearing. Called flow banding, and some of it is really beautiful. This one looks almost sedimentary. But the striping in this rhyolite is flow banding. Sometimes the flow banding is kind of dull and boring. Sometimes the flow banding isn't present at all. And sometimes it's absolutely wild. This guy. Oh, not as exciting as I thought it would be. I grabbed the wrong one. How about this guy? That almost looks like agate, but I don't believe it's agatized. I think we're just seeing flow banding in there.
Mommy!
scoot down the beach short distance. Here's a bigger one. Have a look at this wild guy. Beautiful flow banding in that. Alright, if I wet these, which I just did off camera a moment ago, in a chaotic moment, you can see that beautiful banding even more clearly. And how about that other piece here? Oh, come on. All right. How about this guy? That almost looks like an agate. It's even more clear now that it's not an agate, but flow banding here. A few more pieces that you can see flow banding in. There's a guy right here. Let's see if it shows up better when wet. Honestly, it's a bit worse. It's a bit harder to see when wet. It all darkens a little bit too much. Perhaps if we had better sunlight, it would be better to see. And here's one. Have a look when it's wet. Yeah, you can't see that flow banding as well. You can get amygdaloidal rhyolites. You can get porphyritic rhyolites, just like you can for basalts. Right here is a amygdaloidal basalt. But there are amygdaloidal rhyolites and porphyritic rhyolites as well. Although on this beach, I think you're mostly limited. Oh, here we go. Here's a rhyolite with, yeah, this is a porphyritic rhyolite here. Those are Phenocrysts in it. And it might even be, you see these weathered out bubbles in here. It could have been amygdaloidal also, because those often weather out a bit earlier than the rest of the rock. You also, for reasons I don't fully understand, it's got to be related to the thickness of the lava, the very high viscosity, and the fact that you might have different compositions coming up at different times and they just mix and swirl together kind of inconsistently, but you get a lot of interesting patterning on rhyolites, stuff like this. Well, as beautiful as a red rhyolite shoreline like this is, it does tend to get a little bit boring after a while because it's all the very same red rock. There's different patterning in it, different flow banding and such, but after a while, you just don't have the diversity of rock that really keeps you interested and engaged. Does it look like a paw print to you? That really looks like a paw print. This is a little rhyolite breccia of some sort. This looks like something that might have come from an explosive eruption of rhyolite. Perhaps a pyroclastic flow deposit. You don't find these very often out here. That's interesting. So you can see those blasted, fragmented chunks of rhyolite in a welded matrix of some sort there that is a bit darker than the rhyolite. Interesting. We have here. This is a rhyolite that's undergone some epidote alteration. Turned a bit greenish, but still retains some of the red. Get it wet. You know, somebody left me a comment saying, please, for the love of God, wet all your rocks. We can't see the patterns in it when they're not wet. But honestly, wetting them doesn't always help. I could see that a lot easier before I wet it. Here we go. Here's an amygdaloidal rhyolite with a lot of pockets weathered out of it. The amygdules in rhyolite are often stretched out. Now the reason for that is that they form as bubbles in the first place. In a basalt, which is very liquid, the bubbles form spheres, or perhaps very slightly elongated spheres. But a rhyolite being so incredibly thick, as it flows, those bubbles are sheared and they're stretched out. And that's exactly what you're seeing here. You're seeing the flow direction of the rhyolite. You see it was either flowing from right to left or left to right. It was flowing somewhere in that direction there and stretching these bubbles out. Now keep in mind that these bubbles you see in here, these pockets, aren't the original bubbles. These would have been filled with amygdaloidal minerals of some sort that weathered out later. If we compare some amygdule shapes, we take a look at those elongated ones. And then we take a look at this one in the basalt. Much more spherical. Here's another rhyolite. They're kind of almond shaped, which makes sense because amygdule comes from the Latin or possibly Greek word for almond, almond shaped. I want to point out that everything that I filmed here on this beach, I filmed without moving more than about 4 feet from my original location. And there are miles of rhyolite beach in this area. So there's just so much in every square inch here. It's amazing. And on that note, let's pop back over to Horseshoe Harbor. I'm at a fantastic spot called Horseshoe Harbor here. You'll never guess why it's named that. It is this beautiful horseshoe-shaped harbor that just comes out like so. And does that on the other side, as you might suspect. The rocks here are beautiful red rhyolite all over. Not great collecting because it's all red rhyolite. And there are signs up asking you not to collect here. We'll address that in a minute. The rocks are almost entirely rhyolite here, with just a little bit of basalt mixed in and the occasional epidote that's a little bit green. You look at the shore and they're a bit more dull colored, but you come to the water here and you have a look and it's all that bright brick red. Now the red in the rhyolites comes from mostly the feldspar content in it. You get more potassic feldspar, I believe. Locked within the Copper Harbor conglomerate, you can find all the rhyolite textures that we look for on the shorelines. Here's a beautiful porphyritic rhyolite. You can see those needle-like crystals. Those are Phenocrysts that came up with the rhyolite that formed deep underground. This is one of the better angles to view the entirety of Horseshoe Harbor from. It's a beautiful little spot just north of Copper Harbor, a couple of miles along a dirt road. So as I mentioned, this is on conservancy land. And up at the top of the trailhead, there are signs saying no collecting. But people do collect in places like this. And the question is, can you? Are those signs legally binding? Well, the answer is yes and no. You should listen to the signs, of course. The conservancy land is privately owned land. It is owned by a private person or a private company, and the public is given access to it. Their land, their rules. They say no collecting, no collecting. The thing is, their land ends where it meets the lakeshore. In the state of Michigan, all bottomlands, that is all land beneath the water level, be it a lake or a river, they're held in the public trust. They're public lands. And so up at the top of the beach there, that is privately owned conservancy land. And they're allowed to state whether or not you can collect from there. But below the ordinary high water mark, which is probably somewhere around this point here, that is public land managed by the state of Michigan for the public trust, and you are allowed to collect 25 pounds per year of rocks from Michigan public lands. Every state is different, so make sure you check your own state's laws. So you can collect from here, absolutely. You can collect from here. You cannot collect from there or beyond. Does that make sense? Conservancy land and state parks end at the water boundary. At least they do in the state of Michigan. That's not true of national parks. You can't go to a national park or national lakeshore and then walk an inch into the water and start collecting, because those boundaries tend to extend a mile or more into the lake. Everything I said about conservancy land does not apply to national parks. So please don't take that and go collecting and get yourself into trouble. Now, next question is, you can collect here. Should you? Well, that's a tricky thing. You're allowed to. The Conservancy can say, hey, no collecting from the water. They can say that all they want. They don't have a legal right to ban you from doing that. You have a legal right to collect from it. But should you? Well, here's the thing. While you can, and people certainly do, I'm with people who are doing it right now, the Conservancy can look at what's going on, and even though they can't legally stop you, they can say, well, we don't like that happening. And what they do is the following year, you show up, and the trail is marked closed to the public. No trespassing. And that's it. They've just ended your access to the location you wanted to collect from. So can you collect from the public lands along the lake shore of a conservancy? Yes. Should you? No, or in moderation. If you do collect from a place like this, collect where it's legal, and then only collect a few rocks, maybe tops. Put a couple in your pocket. Don't come down with 5-gallon buckets, because that's the kind of thing that's gonna tick off the conservancy and have them close down public access. And that does happen. So it's a tricky question. I don't think I ever give a straight answer to any question I answer. There's always gray area involved. But that's the situation here. You can collect from certain places along here as long as you're in the public land areas. Should you? No, or in very modest small amounts. Oh, there's a pretty one. That's a basalt with a whole bunch of epidote on it. Oh, that looks like a beautiful porphyritic rhyolite here. Look at that. That's really pretty. I'll leave it right here though. I'm looking at a couple of speckly rocks here. Let's have a look at this guy. That's complex, and I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that. I would hope to explain it to y'all. Look at that, off the top of my head, I can't. This guy here, look at those nice square crystals in there. These guys are very cubic. Are those amygdules? Pop quiz. Well, amygdules form from gas bubbles. Wait, you do not want to focus. Well, amygdules form from gas bubbles trapped in the lava. And as we've discussed, in basalts they're very spherical because the basalt is very runny. And in rhyolites they tend to be elongated, kind of almond shaped, which is where the word amygdule comes from, because they've been stretched out by very gooey lava. But this guy here, it is neither spherical nor stretched out and elongated bubble shaped. These are little cubes, so these are definitely Phenocrysts that form deep within the magma chamber and were carried up. This is a porphyritic rhyolite. But if we come over here and look at, say, this rhyolite, that's very bubbly. That's definitely an amygdaloidal one. This isn't very stretched out. You can see they're very round spherical bubbles in here. So there must not have been much flow in that one. This guy here, hard to say. This might be a porphyritic one that is also amygdaloidal. You can get mixtures of textures in these. Amygdaloidal. More vesicular, but the amygdules just weathered out on this. Very amygdaloidal, vesicular one here. Interestingly, or perhaps the opposite of that, perhaps boringly, I have not found many flow-banded rhyolites out here. So on this location, you just don't find very much flow banding. So perhaps the rhyolites that ended up here came from eruptions that were very, very slow and didn't produce a whole lot of shear. Look at that guy. That's a crazy looking one. These rhyolites, as well as the Copper Harbor conglomerates they come out of, extend all the way up the Keweenaw Peninsula, from south of Copper Harbor all the way to the tip at High Rock Bay. Let's drop in at High Rock Bay, which is one of the more remote points in the continental US, and have a look around. It's accessible by car, technically. The shore at High Rock Bay, like much of the northern Keweenaw, is split between sheer cliffs dropping into the lake and nice rocky shorelines where you can collect. The Copper Harbor conglomerate, which is the source rock unit for all of the beautiful red rhyolites out there, is a highly resistant rock unit. So where that highly resistant rock unit reaches the violent crashing waves of Lake Superior, you get these cliffs forming, but you also get spots where it gets eroded away and all of the rubble that comes off of those cliff faces collects. What you end up with are alternating sections of coastline with pebbly coves that are great to collect from, and they're separated by larger sections of cliff face, hence names like High Rock Bay. Unlike the conservancy lands we've been to, like Horseshoe Harbor and Hunters Point, High Rock Bay is entirely public land. It's all managed by the state, and so you can collect out there. And at this place, you do get agates. There's quite a few agates to be found out there, as well as the occasional euprolite. So it's not just rhyolites. It's actually fantastic collecting out there if you've got a vehicle that can get you out there. The coastline continues without roads from this point for miles and miles. You can walk as far as you want down it. Just make sure you're able to walk back. While this probably isn't technically the most remote part of the continental United States, High Rock Bay is close to nothing in terms of large cities. It's a long drive out there. And then the final stretch of road to get out there is only about 5 or 6 miles, but even with a very high lifted truck, you're barely going to make it out there without destroying your vehicle, and it's going to take you close to an hour driving about 6 or 7 miles an hour the whole way out. It's just difficult to reach. That's part of the appeal. Getting out there is an accomplishment that you're proud of after the fact, and you don't find very many people out there. This is a typical summer day. You see there are people out there. There is a campground. It is a very primitive campground, but it's certainly not a crowded spot because so few people can actually make it out there. If you do decide to visit though, make sure you're not expecting any amenities whatsoever. You are out in the woods, you're out in nature. There's not much to the site except God's country. And that pretty well wraps up our review of rhyolites in Michigan and in the Keweenaw Peninsula. I want to thank you for joining me and my family. I hope you learned quite a lot about the rhyolites out there. And I would strongly encourage you to get yourself an amazing pasty at one of the local shops, sit yourself down for lunch or dinner on these red rhyolite shores, and just look through the rocks and learn a little bit about the volcanic eruptions that happened 1 billion years ago. The record's still preserved on our shores. When you understand the rocks you're looking at, you can see the world as it was 1 billion years ago, hundreds of millions of years before the advent of multicellular life. I hope you've enjoyed this journey with me, and I hope you'll join me next time. Until then, happy hunting, and I'll see you on the shores.